when you take the whole scope of human experience, and there's a recent book by an anthropologist that studies folklore and makes this case. But if you take the whole scope of human experience across, the written historical record, humans generally have experienced the world as alive and full of all kinds of life, beyond ourselves. There's all different varieties of, kind of stories of origins, what types of creatures. Of course, you've got a whole host of different, angelic and, fallen angelic creatures in all different world religions. And so that you've got this huge range of human experience up into the present day. And then you've got kind of this little, fairly small, thin slice of, post-Enlightenment Western, humanity that just is sort of completely alienated from this experience and doesn't experience the world that way. And it raises a kind of basic question, like, are we the only sane people that have ever lived? Are we, the ones who are turned on to reality? Or are we the ones who are turned off to reality in some way? And as I kind of step back and said, ask that question to myself and try to be honest, I'm like, I'm probably more turned off to reality in certain ways based on various cultural factors and just kind of, situations in my own history and how I live, with I'm plugged in and have a cell phone. And there's a quote that I just love from, it's actually C.S. Lewis is writing to Arthur Greeves. I think it's a letter to a friend by C.S. Lewis. And he talks about a lunch that he had, the day before with Tolkien. And they got talking about the hills being alive, the streams, the naiads and the dryads and all that. And Tolkien made some comment to Lewis that, people lived in the same basic, like in the same little valley, for generations through most of human history. You'd have, 12, 13, 20 generations or more in the same kind of river valley. And literally everything they ate, their bodies were made of the stuff of that place, the water, the soil, the sunlight. Everything they ate was from right there. So they're sitting there eating lunch, somewhere in Oxford, I guess. And Tolkien's like, look at the wine, it's from Australia. Look at the beef, it's from Argentina. And they're like, they're sitting there, 1960s or 50s England, and every single item, they're eating or drinking together. It was from like 5 different continents, And so Tolkien says, we're completely disconnected from the land, from the, from our place, from our kind of heritage, and the strength of the hills is not ours. So that was kind of the phrase that stuck with me. C.S. Lewis reporting Tolkien saying that. And, there's a lot of different ways you can go with it, but just that basic question of, are we the ones who are missing something and unable to see something, or is it the rest of humanity who's always had this kind of bizarre, trippy, fantasy or delusion or something, that it would be sort of so ubiquitous in human experience. It struck me, I was reading Stephen R.L. Clark. He had some quote about Athanasius saying that all the guardians and the spirits that, live in the springs and the hills and the trees, we're all demons. And this is Athanasius, one of the church fathers. And I was reading that and I was like, man, that's kind of disappointing, take on it. And then I was reading somewhere else, a few weeks later, and Origen, just about 200 years earlier, is writing about the exact same phenomenon to all his, all the faithful in Alexandria. And Origen says, everyone has always believed that the life of the springs and the hills and the trees surrounding us is attended to by guardians who, bring forth and participate in that life. Or he uses the word guardians, and he says, we do not believe that these are demons, specifically. So I just was like, wow, there's this kind of shift that takes place at some point in Christian thought, over this time frame where, maybe it's the kind of polemic, back and forth with paganism, or I'm sure it's different in different places, but we generally kind of have that Christianity has a reputation of having sort of played a big role in, disenchanting the world and, kind of pushing all of that aside as kind of demonic and evil. But there's this very, prominent early, respected in his own day theological voice, Origen specifically saying these are good and blessed aspects of God's creation that, that we have no reason to fear. And, later on, there's a passage in Calvin, of all people, he talks about he's actually expounding on the passage in Ezekiel, with these wild kind of angelic creatures riding on wheels and sort of carrying the presence of God, the Shekinah glory of God. And he's expounding on that, and he basically says that all things, all creatures, oxen, cattle, sheep, are animated by angelic life. And it's very almost like Dante-esque, like it's love that moves the stars, that line from Dante. But it's John Calvin, he's rhapsodizing for 3 or 4 sentences about how everything participates in the life of God by means of participating in angelic life. And he's talking about animals that surround us, and he references us as well. So, but it's like the whole creation is very much included in. It's just so widespread and ubiquitous, this idea that creation is alive, and the experience of it. And I think taking that seriously and not, just kind of poo-pooing it is actually a critical part of a kind of spiritual life, a walk with God.